in my experience, and I taught high school for years, and I, of course, was a performance major. I have a master's degree in performance. I was always really nervous to the point it almost always caused problems when I played. And I would get all kinds of different advice. One teacher said, sing the melody, whatever you're playing. And right, we get all this advice, and none of it really, really works, does it? Some of it helps a little bit. Get out of your own way. Don't think about the audience, all this stuff. But none of it really, really helps because we're still really nervous. I used to give advice to my students, whatever, it doesn't matter now. You already have your grade, just get up on stage and play, you're fine. What I found was that didn't work so well, but the better they got, the less nervous they were. We read books. The famous one is The Inner Game of Music, which I've had for years, which I read some of years ago. It's kind of hard to get through it because it's general anecdotes. It's just stories about things that kind of work in some areas. It's actually good information, but it doesn't talk about the underlying causes. Anyone, depends how old you are, may remember the banana phase, where everyone at competitions was eating bananas, because bananas have potassium, and some study somewhere said potassium will calm you down before you... and then there's a lot, and I used to see that all the time at competitions. Everyone was eating a banana. Didn't work. There's a lot of folk advice out there. People just say, do this or do that. A lot of times you're getting this advice from people who are already so good they're not nervous anyway. So that the advice only works for them, but not for you. So there's a lot of this type of folk advice. Try this, do that. I even saw in one Facebook group that someone said, a teacher now said you should hype yourself up. You should maybe try this. Hype yourself up and jog and run and get your heart rate way up and then go on stage. There's even evidence for this. Of course, she listed no evidence, so I asked what it was. She directed me to an article about a study, not the study itself, an article which at the very end said, of course you wouldn't want to try this with something like music. We don't even read the whole article, right? So what are some of the myths we have to deal with? Well, we have the pro performer myth. That is, what do pro performers say? They're trying to sympathize with us, and they all say, we get nervous too. The famous guitarist from the 20th century, Segovia, said to one of his students who noticed he was nervous before he went on stage, I can't believe you get nervous, maestro. And he said, the only people who don't get nervous are idiots and children. And I remember my instructor telling me that story in front of a group of people once, and he looked at me and he said, and I know you're not a child. So anyway, it was a good laugh for everyone, I suppose. So yes, pro performers get nervous, but here's the difference. When they walk out on stage, they already know they can play everything. What happens when we walk out on stage? We were working on that section up until an hour ago, weren't we? Or those 2 or 3 sections. We were working on them the night before. The pro performer could play everything 2 weeks before the concert, all the way through. And that's only if it's the first concert. If it's the 30th concert, they played it every night for the last, 20 nights, 29 nights, whatever it is. And every night they get on stage, they're nervous, but you know what happens? Everything goes okay. When's the last time we walked on stage and said, oh yeah, I've done this a bunch of times, everything's gonna be fine. So yes, performers get nervous, but as soon as they get out there, those nerves revert to calmness because everything works, and that is the cure. When we walk out there, what do? Gosh, I hope I have one of those lucky 1 in 10 performances where I hit every section. Let's be honest, isn't that what happens? Because we all have little sections that are problems that we work on for a long time. And then there's the great misunderstanding of talent. You work, and work on sections, and you just don't get them. And you think, I tried as hard as they could, I just must not have talent for this. But it's actually not. It's teaching instead of talent, because you can teach people to have talent. So I'm going to start a little PowerPoint here. Give me just a second to start this, and then do a screen share. We're going to look at a couple of things and a couple of solutions. And by the way, what I'm going to share with you today, it works the same for testing anxiety. Testing anxiety shouldn't exist either, and we can easily memorize anything we want for tests and recall it immediately. I teach people in my academic coaching to do this all the time, but we just don't address it the right way. We address it after the fact. Oh, you're nervous? Try doing this. How about do this underneath so you don't get nervous? And it works. It really works. So let me start the slideshow, and then I'm going to move this window over here and share. Okay, so you should have the PowerPoint up in front of you right now. I'm going to move that window again. There we go. Okay, so performance anxiety is curable, 100% curable. The cure, and now I'm going to say this and then I'm going to break it down, so don't worry if it's confusing. The cure for performance anxiety is working on things other than performance anxiety, because the cause of the problem is not the anxiety, it's the performance. Now, what do I mean by that? The cure for performance anxiety is working on things other than performance anxiety. We tend to work on the anxiety. Quiet the self-talk. Sing the melody to yourself as you play. And when the talk is too much, it seems to affect our performance and start a downward spiral, creating negative thoughts and then worse and worse performance as we move forward. However, that's backwards. It is not the anxiety that's making our performance worse. It's the performance that's making our anxiety worse. The cause of the problem is not the anxiety, it is the performance. Be honest. Have you ever walked on stage knowing that you could play everything at or above tempo without problems because for the last week you've done it perfectly? It's rare we walk on stage, sometimes never. What do we really do? We walk on stage going, oh, I've got that section and I just hope, sometimes it goes right, sometimes it doesn't. Boy, I just hope I can get that down. And then we walk on stage and what happens? The performance confirms what we're worried about. We may get lucky and play a little bit better than normal, but we still have those problem sections. And then the self-talk keeps going, right? And then it gets worse and worse. What if you could walk on stage or into a lesson knowing that you've played it exactly as you would like many times previous? What if the self-talk didn't matter? Think about this for a minute. When you're nervous and you're talking to yourself, you know to tell yourself to play, it's time to start playing. My finger should go here. And then you can't find the information, right? You can't find the motor programs in your brain that you need to use. Well, guess what? You don't fall down when you walk on stage and you're nervous then and you're having self-talk then. Your legs don't just stop from holding you up and you fall on the floor. So you can access those motor programs when you're talking and nervous as heck, but you can't access the other ones. Why? Because your motor programs for walking and standing are stored better and more easily retrieved because you've practiced them in a different way. What if we could practice performing that way? What if we could practice those sections of music that are so hard that way, that we're not worried about them, and when we get on stage and we're like, I hope this works, everything starts working, no matter how much self-talk we have, because the recall is automatic. So I hear this referred to, like in the inner game of music and things like this, as letting go. You have to let go and not be so nervous with all the talk. Well, let's look at what letting go looks like in the brain, because this is something people don't really usually talk about. I want to see if I can move this window. Hey, I can. I like that. Okay, I want to show you what letting go looks like in the brain. So this is a brain learning a task. It's a motor skill. As it starts to learn it, you know what this is right here, folks? This is self-talk. This is the prefrontal cortex of your brain focusing on what's going on in the moment and saying, oh my gosh, there's an audience out there. What do I do? In this case, it's saying, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this skill. Okay? I need to figure out, my finger's too far to the left. Oh my gosh, that's an F sharp, not an F natural. That's what all this is. And it's trying to tell the rest of the brain what to do. Then we start to figure it out. Hey, I think I've got it. Now we don't have this part of the brain going it on, and this is called a process efficiency change, and now we can do it, right? So we start learning something, we can't do it, and we can do it slowly. If we, for instance, in the inner game of music, it says quiet your mind and describes the process of going to sleep as a way to quiet the mind. Letting go finally happens when we can give up the conscious control and allow ourselves to receive and transmit the musicianship. Well, you know what? The person who wrote that is able to do this, but they don't know how they got there. That person knows how to play all their stuff. They're not worried when they walk on stage, so they can easily go into this automatic mode. What happens is when we first get something here and we can play it, then we have to get it faster, better, and that's hard, isn't it? It's hard to get it faster. Then we have to be able to pull it out of our brain into working memory while we're playing. We don't work very well on the faster, better thing, and we don't work at all on the pulling it out thing. That's why when we get on stage and our brain is all focusing on other stuff, that's why we can't find that information. We haven't worked on pulling it out. We've only worked a little bit on putting it in. So working memory, that's what you're thinking right now, is taken up with the task at hand. That is thinking about the audience. Well, you don't need your working memory to walk because you can access those motor programs. Once you can access motor programs that you have for playing your instrument, you don't have to worry about what the working memory is doing. You don't have to worry about quieting the self-talk. Go ahead and let it happen. Your hands are going to work anyway. Then the self-talk turns into, whoa, this is fun. Man, I'm playing well. Then the self-talk turns into, I think I'd like to do a little crescendo here, and now you're living the music. So, what is it? How do you initially get to this state? It's something researchers call deliberate practice. This term was first coined in 1993 by Anders Ericsson, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention he passed this week, and he's the most important person in skill development, as far as I can tell, in the history of researching that. So I wanted to acknowledge that. He's one of the most influential people on me, this part of my life for sure. His work is wonderful, but it can be a little bit complex to understand. Even if you read his book, it takes a lot to understand it. So I break deliberate practice down to this. Now, I would like to say to everyone here and anyone watching this, I'm going to go through these things very quickly. There are lectures themselves as part of the Virtuosity.online YouTube channel where I spend about 10 or 15 minutes on these subjects. So feel free to go watch them. I am not going to teach them completely today. I'm just going to give you an idea of how this works. So this is a process that I describe as 3 steps. You do repetitions, right? We all do repetitions. Now let me ask you, do you do the repetition and then right afterwards say, what could be better? What do I want to do differently? And then you do it, and then you say, oh, I want my finger to be more accurate on this note, better intonation. Well, I'll try it. Did it work? No, I'll try it again. Is that how our repetitions, let's be honest, is that how we do our repetitions? For most people, the answer is no. This is how we do them. With the reflect part gone. We just plan, do. I'd like to get it better. I don't know how. I'm just going to keep trying. I have found, especially teachers will find this a little bit amazing, but I have found that really, I can't believe how much people need to be taught this stuff over and over again, where you have to be taught to think about what you're doing. This is where the myth of talent is. Someone does that for a half hour a day, they're going to be way better than someone who does this, what you're looking at now, without the reflect, who does it for an hour a day. And then you wonder why one person can practice less and get better and another can practice more. It is this type of practice, deliberate practice. Now, when we start reflecting and looking at what we need to improve, we have to be aware of something. Oh, and by the way, this is something that I've heard referred to as the play and pray method. That's how a lot of us practice, isn't it? We hope we'll get something done. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. What if you could walk into every practice knowing how to solve every problem? Maybe it won't, maybe it'll take 3 days, but you know what to do. That's what I'm going to show you in the Practiclass today. We're going to take some of those sections you've been working on that are really hard and you don't know how to get better. We're going to fix them in about 20 minutes. And if they can be fixed in 20 minutes, why are we struggling with them for weeks before a performance? Think about it. You can walk out on stage totally dominating, being able to play everything that you want to play, and the nerves just go away. Be aware as we start to do this of the Dunning-Kruger effect. What this basically says is that, and you can read the description here, people tend to hold overly favorable views of their abilities in many social and intellectual domains. They also suggest blah, blah, blah. What that really says is the less you know about something, the better you will think you are at doing it. So you'll do a repetition. How was that? It was fine. Really? Pay attention. Do it again. Oh, I guess there's some. As you learn more, you can see more problems. So be careful when you first start reflecting. There's a lot of things you don't notice. For instance, have you ever gotten on stage and there are sections that you didn't really need to practice because they were easy, and then you get to them and all of a sudden there's something wrong with them and you can't play them? Those things were always wrong. You just didn't notice them in your practice because you didn't stop and think and develop it. They were always like that. You just let them go because you could kind of sight read. And then when your brain was hyper-focused in front of people, all of a sudden those things start happening and surprise you. We need to know about, this is the next thing, the power law of practice. What this shows is the lower you are on this chart, the faster you are at doing something, the faster your knowledge is working. Every time you do a repetition, you get less and less and less benefits. So what do you want to do? We all have that, right? We get to a certain point and it's just not getting any better and we keep trying. Then we apply, and there's another lecture on this up on the Virtuosity site, contextual interference. Research shows that struggling through something after we initially learned it improves that thing significantly in shorter periods of time. What you want to do is try to make it harder. So play it with a different rhythm. Play it backwards. We're going to do this today, so I'm not going to talk a lot about that. By varying elements of whatever it is we're trying to improve, we create desirable difficulty and accelerated learning. We will do that today. I'm not going to go into a big explanation. The goal is to create struggle. It will feel frustrating and we may feel like we can't do it. We will likely feel like we don't want to do it and want to quit. This is where the idea of mindset is important. Mistakes are okay. Effort is okay. if you start playing better all the time and then wonder why something isn't going well, it's because you were playing better all the time. Do stuff that actually makes you worse, which will make you way better in the long run. I wanted to show you just a couple of people, different levels. This is a beginner, a little bit near beginner classical guitarist, a arts magnet school saxophone major, and then and this is about 2 minutes, and then a professional cellist teacher, all going through this process in a Practiclass, quick before and afters. And I'll explain a couple things about performance.
I've been working on this one piece for months, and I still haven't got it to click.
This is his best performance. This is what happens on stage.
I was able to make it work in one lesson.
Sorry for the marking.
Got it.
It was amazing.
Why would you be nervous if you could play like that?
Most all of us seem to have those sections in our music that we practice like crazy for weeks or months, but it never seems to go right in performance, whether it's a lesson or a concert. Yet we also know those folks who can pull off live performance seemingly easily, and we call them talented and gifted, and that's why. You're getting good instructions from your teacher, and you have all the tools you need, so what is missing? It turns out it's the way you use your brain in your practice when no one else is around. The way the brain learns best is way different than the way most people do it. In fact, the few people who do it are the ones that seem gifted and talented. Once you start practicing in this way, you start to make a lot of progress very quickly. And it starts to make practice a lot more fun, and you start to look forward to it a lot more because you're making so much progress. That's what we do in a Practiclass. We take one of those sections that has been giving you trouble for a long time that you're never going to seem to be able to fix, and in about 20 minutes, we make it faster, cleaner, and easier to play. Well, I'm here to go into the nitty-gritty of why can't we get those notes in tempo, and then kind of there's usually a little bit of classification for this. So, what do you think is the hardest section? One that just gave you fix? It was right there.
I just performed a solo last week, and I had so many problems with tempo and speed and accuracy.
Does that sound like something you're familiar with? You work something up and you go and play it, and then there are still problems which make you nervous.
For just 30 minutes.
This was a section that gave him a lot of trouble. Worked all semester on it.
So we started at 80, that's 168. Yeah?
He didn't even know he was playing it that fast.
All of those problems as well as double my speed, and I played it cleanly and just perfect in general.
Okay, so if you can do that at 168, how easy?
I'll save the third one. I think you get the idea. Okay? Do you see? If you can do that and it feels so easy, if you can actually play everything you want to play faster than you need so it feels like it's slow on stage, just like he did. He was working on that for months. And just by changing the way he practiced it, he was able to do that. So I want to share with you, and by the way, this isn't some secret thing that I do. This is all in the science and the literature. Anyone can learn to do this. I just teach people how to do this stuff. So, but I'm one of the few people I know that's doing this, so I'm giving you my experience. I want to share with you some things some students have said. So one, 13-year-old student going to a competition. Something weird happened because he went to the competition and he did really well. And I said, how did it go? This is the first thing out of his mouth. Something weird happened. I wasn't nervous. We never worked on performance anxiety. It just went away because he could competently perform, and he was able to do that over and over. In his case, one of the things we were working on was a Mozart concerto, and we started weeks before the String Academy at IU that he was going to. We started weeks in advance, and we started working on parts of the cadenza that were super hard. He thought he'd be working on those things up until the day he played. He had them finished the week before he went. And then we started working on other things. So it's a big difference. Here's one from someone Kevin will know, Michaela Rayburn, who I worked with for a while. She said, I've never been able to express myself when I get up on the stage. Now I'm not nervous, so I can let the emotion come through, and that makes performance really fun. You see how people have fun playing? when they're not struggling with their technique and wondering if it will work, when they can get it all from their own long-term memory, everything works and you can have fun and express yourself. Here's a guy from Florida State. That's going to stick with me forever and is the reason that difficult passages are no longer stressful once practiced the right way. Again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. The reason I include that is you can see that it has an impact. Losing performance anxiety, especially when you don't work on it, and I never worked on it with any of these students, feels wonderful. Okay? So performance, this is the last thing. Once you get something stored and you've done your contextual interference and it's pretty good, then you have to remember to be able to perform it when you're on stage in the moment. That's kind of hard because it's not going to be the same as when you just played it 50 times. So when many of us experience working very hard on certain things and then finding when we perform in a concert or in a lesson that these things don't go nearly as well as we had them in practice. Once we get something learned, then we have to be able to recall it immediately in performance. In practice, we may have repped something many times or worked on it for a period of time. Our previous attempts are fresh in our working memory to help guide our future attempts. In performance, there's a lot of time and other playing in between when we played those sections and when we need to recall them. In this case, we need to recall the information from long-term memory for which there is not a recent cue. So how do we work on being able to recall stuff? We forget it. We put spaces in between repetitions, bigger and bigger and bigger, until we can recall it out from nowhere. I'm not going to go deep into this because there's another virtuosity lecture on this up there. It's called retrieval practice, but I'm going to go very quickly to the steps, and then we're going to talk about it today because spacing is what I'm going to ask both of you to do once we solve the problems today so that you can take that solution and it will come out when you're on stage. Choose a difficult section that you've isolated and you can play well very slow. Play the section slowly enough to have total control. Wait 5 minutes and then play it once again. That's it, once. Excuse me. Do it about every 5 minutes, even if it gets worse. Then, if you want to do a little bonus round, the next day make it 10. The next day make it 15. It will get worse and worse. Then about the 4th day, it will get magically better in ways that you can't imagine. Understand that just like when you perform the section in concert, it will not be as good as when you are isolating it. Don't let the poorer performance indicate that you are not learning, because you are. As you strengthen the recall process over a day or days, it will not only improve, but will improve when performed as part of the larger piece as well. Give it, at most, 4 days before you evaluate effectiveness. And then, of course, performing is a good thing once you do this, because the more performances you have, the more time you've experienced the testing effect. Research shows that if you give someone a test and they do poorly on parts of it, if you give them an interval in between and then give them the test again without any further study, they will get answers right that they got wrong the first time around. So by trying to retrieve something, you actually get better at retrieving it when you need it. And that is performance anxiety.